Hi, I'm Sleepless Skies, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how you go from a mix that sounds like this to one that sounds like this, and the common problems producers have when they try and get that really pro sound. So let's jump into the door and get into the mix. Okay, this is my project file for a track called Still in Love, which will be out very soon on No Place Like Home. And I want to show the difference between the way that I've treated this before fixing some of the issues in the mix and the way it sounds afterwards. So I've actually created two versions of this project in the DAW, and I've got like a before and an after one. So we're going to jump into some of these different challenges that you can face in your mix and show how we fix them actually in the project itself. So here's the before one. And the first bit I want to focus on is poor sound selection. So this is number one problem, I think, for people trying to kind of make their mix sound better, trying to get that pro sound, is actually just not choosing the right sounds in the first place. And I'm going to show you what I mean just by focusing in, first of all, on some drums. Like, drums are kind of a key one for the difference between pro and amateurish sounding music. So here's the drums from the before one, and then so we can see that the snare in this second one is so much more powerful than the snare in the first. So let's have a look and see what we did. We just by changing the snare out. So you can see this snare here sounds like this. And then this snare down here sounds like this. So what I've done to the second snare is just add some fullness and a bit more of a 909 feel to it. And so when you hear it in the context of the actual track, you get this difference. So this before snare is just kind of getting buried in here. Whereas this snare now is adding way more energy. Obviously, there's lots of other stuff going on, but you can hear that the snare has suddenly got more energy, and that's all I've done is change the snare sound, and suddenly the sound selection is much better. The other thing that we can be doing is thinking about the way that we actually treat our instruments. So this lead sound in the before track sounds like this. It's kind of flat and a bit dry and not a lot. It's not very interesting. Whereas if we listen to the one from the after track that's had all the problems fixed, it sounds like this. Way more interesting, way nicer. So let's look and see what I'm doing here. So the first thing I've done is I've added this, which is like a white noise layer. So I've put this on top of the, you can hear this without it. So it's adding energy, and that's just Diva with all of the oscillators turned off and the noise turned up full. And then I can control the kind of nature of that white noise, the length of it, the filtering of it. I can control all of that using the ADSR in Diva itself. So it gives me a lot of control. And I'm actually, you can see, automating that in and out. I'm automating all of these different elements. I've actually grouped them onto this bus. So the frequency, the decay, and the release are mapped to the frequency, decay, and the release here. So you've got the cutoff, the release, noise volume. It's all mapped into this group. And then I can actually control these together. That's going to control both the cutoff on the pluck sound and also the cutoff on the noise as well. So I'm controlling them together. But what that really allows you to do is just create really interesting moments where you can have the noise getting louder, quieter, longer, more tail on it, all of this kind of stuff. The next thing I'm doing as well is I've added this, which is some saturation. saturation on everything. I always put saturation on everything because it really just kind of beefs things up. Not a lot, just a bit, just a taste. And then this crystallizer. So if I play without, so we've still got some spatial effects on this, which I'll show you in a second. But by adding crystallizer, it creates this kind of like reversing effect. Super cool. The other thing I've got on here to spice things up is this drum, is this reverb group. So I haven't got a delay on this because, you know, the crystallizer kind of acts like a delay. But what I have got is an addition of vintage verb. I've got it using this lush vocal preset set to about 4 seconds, and that's creating some nice space. I always do this on this reverb channel. So I've EQ'd it quite a bit to take out the bottom and and quite a bit of the top as well, so there's no harshness. And then I'm compressing the signal to itself. So I'm feeding this lead signal into the sidechain compressor, and then it's compressing the signal as it comes through. You can hear that. So what that means is that lead signal is nice and prominent, and then the reverb comes in afterwards, so they're not fighting together. And then I've also got a sidechain compressor linked to the kick, so that those tails are being compressed and not getting in the way of the kick or making the whole mix sound a bit too muddy. So that's what's on this lead. And that's the importance of sound selection. It can make a massive difference. Guys, just 1 second. If you really want to help me out, please remember to like and subscribe to the video. Now let's get back to it. Okay, the next thing that can make a huge difference to the quality of a mix and that pro sound is mud and air, right? If you've got a dull mix, there's not enough air at the top end, it's going to sound flat and lifeless. Equally, if you've got too much bottom end pushing through, it's going to sound dull and muddy. So we've got this problem with mud, which usually comes in here at this. If you can see this EQ, we've got around the 250 mark. You can see I've added a load of mud to this before mix. And I've also carved off the top about 3 dB of the air at the top end, right? And if you listen to this version here, and then when I take that off, you can hear the difference that having too much of a build-up of instruments in that muddy section makes. And also just taking the top end off just kills it. Now, obviously, you wouldn't put an EQ like that on a real track. I'm doing this for the demonstration of this video to show you what it's like if you get your mix balance wrong. I've actually got quite a decent mix balance, even on the before track here, because I've mixed this all previously. And I've just gone in to kind of like mess this up a bit for the purpose of the video. But if you get to a point where your mix sounds like that and it's coming out, that's one of the biggest reasons for having a muddy mix. And what you need to do then is go back in, mix balance, maybe use pink noise as a way to do that. It's really, really helpful. And also use referencing to make sure that your mix sounds the same roughly as other competitive professional mixers in your genre. Okay, the next thing that could really make mixes sound amateurish and not professional is a lack of warmth and depth. They just don't feel as full as a professional mix. And honestly, the answer to that is saturation and compression, and lots of it. So when I'm making music, you can see I add saturation and compression all the way through the mix. Here in this mix, this kind of before one, I've taken off all of the saturation and compression that exists throughout the mix, and you can see all of these compressors and different there's limiters, there's all these different elements, saturators, compressors. I've added it to almost every single instrument chain in here. There's something going on that's kind of helping the track feel thick. So we can see it down here as well. There's a more saturation on the piano, little bits of very gentle saturation. You can see here, it's not even fully wet. It's not even past 1. It's a really gentle amount of saturation. If we listen to the piano here, let's just have a listen. So that's without it. And that's with it. And it's subtle. But I don't want my piano to sound like it's gone through a massive distressor. I just want it to sound a little bit richer and warmer. And if I add this subtle amount of saturation to every single part of my mix, then it will all add up and create this kind of bigger, warmer, richer sound. So I'm doing this all the way through. The other place that saturation and compression really matters is on your drums. Listen to the difference. I've actually volume balanced these so that you can hear the difference, but listen to the difference between the drum chain before it's had the saturation and compression put on it and limiting put on it, and the difference afterwards. So this is before. And this is after. You see how much brighter it sounds? Just how much bigger and fuller? So saturation and compression will make a big difference all the way through your mix. Compression will also help to bring the peaks of your mix down. So those top parts, the loudest parts of your mix, will come down in volume. And what that means by comparison is the rest of your mix will lift in volume because your ear is using the loudest parts and the quietest parts of your mix as reference points for how loud the mix sounds overall. So by bringing down the peaks and bringing up the average loudness, you'll create a fuller, fatter sounding mix. There's a lot you could say about compression and limiting and how to use them really effectively in the mix. I'm not going to go into all the details here, but needless to say, this is a hugely important part, and I would use saturation, compression, and limiting on quite a lot of the musical instruments in every single mix that I do. So the next thing that really separates pro sounding mixes from amateur ones is width, and that width creates the perception of loudness. Let me show you the difference in width between these two mixes. So this is the before mix that hasn't had all the effects and everything added. Look how down the center it is. And now we'll look at the after mix. Look at how it grows straight away. We've got all this stuff happening in the sides. Okay, so there's lots of ways you can achieve width in your mix, and honestly, it's about moving things to the side. So one of the ways that I do that, if I go to the mix that is the after mix, this one here, and you'll see that quite a lot of my instrument racks have this little return channel H switched up. So I've got it on the lead, the piano, the vocals, I've got it on some of these harmonics, and then if we go down, I've even got it on a couple of the bass layers. And that return channel is something called widener. And what I've put on widener is an addition of wider. So this is the Infected Mushroom plugin wider. I would highly recommend getting this. It's super cool, and it basically just makes everything wide whilst also being mono compatible. It's really great. So we've got, and it's free as well. So we've got wider. I've then put another widener on, which is a Haas effect. You can do this in Ableton with the delay module. So I've just set that Haas effect to about 15 milliseconds, so it's really wide. And then I've also got an EQ just to make sure that I'm not making the bass elements wide. So I just want everything under about 500 hertz to be widened. But I'm not just doing that on that return channel. I've also got little additions of wider all the way through my track, pushing certain elements out to the edges, and this is allowing me to create width in little bits all the way through the track without it introducing a load of phasing issues and things like that. It's just lots of little elements each time. Okay, so we're on the fifth and final one of these differences between amateur and pro sounding mixes. And you're probably saying to yourself at some point, yeah, but there's just so much more stuff in the second mix. Like, it's actually just a more interesting song. And you'd be right. One of the things I've done in the first mix is I completely switched off this harmonics group that have all these textures in, and also this kind of pluck counter melody. And if we listen to what's going on in these textures, you can hear what I mean and what a difference they're making. So they've got so much kind of detail in here. And then for this pluck, that's all up here, spatial stuff. So if we listen to the track without it, and then with it, it's like night and day. So what I'm trying to show you here is that these layers really matter. Like adding up, building up little layers bit by bit all the way through the track is actually what creates depth and interest. The other thing I entirely switched off in the first track is transitions. So everything like white noise, risers, fills, and these sorts of things really add a lot of like interest and dynamism to a track. Like you can hear this kind of just all this kind of stuff in the atmospheric kind of background that's kind of creating texture for the track itself and helping each section to kind of move from one section to the rest. You know? So it's just like always kind of keeping the track moving and giving energy. So if we listen to that in place, it's not prominent, but it just makes everything sound a bit better. And then of course there's things like drops and risers and build-ups and breakdowns and big like drops like this one, which just make stuff sound huge. So yeah, add that. So those are some of the most common problems that people have when trying to get that pro sound. But if you really want to find out how to get signed to labels like Colorize and Ingenuity, then maybe watch this video where I show you how I did.